Good day. This is Red Hawk coming to you from the deep end. And today we're going to go to a place that to me is very interesting and helpful and somewhat compassionate making. And that's the stages of spiritual development. Now, you'll get what I'm saying here in a little bit, but why? Well, I think when we understand the stages, and we can reduce them to some simple categories, that if we become aware, then we can begin to heal. And I say heal because the thing about it is you're always feeling a threat from those who are a stage above you in spiritual development. This helps us understand politics. It helps us understand a whole lot of stuff. So these threats that we see in each other, how do we heal them? Well, the first thing is become aware of what the differences are that cause the people to feel afraid and threatened. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, I have to say there are a lot of ways to look at spiritual development. And today I want to look at it from the perspective of James Fowler's Stages of Faith. He's a psychologist and he goes into great detail. But I'm going to take his stuff and put it through the grid of another mind, Scott Peck, and his book, The Different Drum. He has a chapter called Patterns of Transformation, and what he does is Peck reduces the many stages of spiritual development coming out of Fowler to 4. And these are ways of seeing ourselves and to see other people, to understand. Now, the first phase of spiritual development, and again, we don't all necessarily pass through these, although sometimes we do. The first stage is the chaotic antisocial. Basically, this is considered undeveloped spirituality. And these are the folks that really are unable to care past themselves. Jails and prisons are full of these folks, and I might add, so are politics. I worked in the jails and prisons for about 3 years when I was in Davidson County, that's Nashville, and I have to say I got to know a lot of folks in this particular sensibility. But some basically say anything is better than chaos, and they do change. Now, how do they change? Well, the next stage is called the formal institutional, and this is basically you submit to an institution. Now, the people I worked with, they were in prison, okay? And to be honest, we've all heard of the model prisoner who gets out and within 3 weeks commits another crime to go back to prison. Some people need to be told when they can piss, when they can take a shower, when they can do whatever. This attachment to form stage is the formal institutional. Now, not everybody's a criminal in that sense, but some people are just needing an outward form to hang their understandings on. And these are the folks in church who are attached to liturgy, traditional order of things. God is this external, transcendent being, and that has this unbelievable, radical, punitive power, kind of a cop in the sky God, yet all loving. But they don't have any understanding or sense of an immanent or indwelling God, if you will. And if you look at this, stability is the principal value. Now, I will say, as a post-war child, a lot of people came out of that war and they just wanted stability. And that's what the church created. Churches were part of communities, stability, and all that stuff. But those of us who were brought up inside that stability, well, we internalized what the families were doing without. So something got ingrained in our hearts, and the institution out there no longer was relevant. It's almost like we became self-governing human beings, and we had no sense of dependence on any institution anymore. My parents did. They depended on it. And it's amazing, coming out of almost 50 years of pastoring, to watch the church change as less and less people need the church in order to sustain their stability. So there's a point where those of us church began to seem superstitious and silly and almost irrelevant. And it converts us to what? Skeptics and individuals. Now, the individual here is not antisocial, because people in this stage are deeply involved. Justice is a huge piece of this. And these folks are usually more spiritual. They make up their own minds about things. A lot of them become scientists. But we're also able to submit to something higher than our own beliefs. What that is? Truth. And if we're able to continue to pursue and push our understanding of past our own beliefs, we begin to see that we can put the pieces of the puzzle together, even with the knowledge that they will never have a whole picture. And this moves us to the age of mystery, which is where probably many of the listeners of this podcast are. We begin to recognize unity, an underlying connectedness between everything. And not only the connectedness, but that we are integral parts. And the more you understand, the deeper the mystery becomes. And this is where the whole idea of emptiness happens, because you empty yourself so that you can get filled with everything that you can possibly know, and then you realize you'll never have a whole picture. And that, becoming at home with the mystery, wow. So what's interesting about mystery is many people who return to church in my generation are going to church to approach the mystery, to go deeper into it. Now, if you're a stage 2, you're going to the church to escape the mystery. So you see there's a whole different understanding here. And this is the piece I want us to get, is that we are usually threatened by people in the stages above us. And this is not always conscious. Stage 1 people are threatened by just about everybody. Let me tell you, when I worked in the prisons, everybody was happy. Everything was great. But everybody was the other. Everybody. Everybody's trying to pull a con on you. Think about Trump. Why is he always thinking someone's trying to pull something on him? Because he's trying to pull something on everybody. It's classic projection. So we are threatened by people above us. Stage 1, again, when you get to stage 2, we have the whole concept of sinners and backsliding. Okay, when you hear that language, you're usually talking about someone who's trying to get out from under chaos, and the institution is offering, the rituals and all that is offering some way of helping them. So stage 2 is this institutional formal. Stage 3, on the other hand, are not threatened by stage 1 nor by stage 2, but they're really upset with stage 4 people. And I have to say, I was a Unitarian, and I really pissed a lot of people off, because I could be scientific minded, and footnote and all that stuff, but I still had a sense of this crazy notion of God. And it drove some of those folks crazy. We will return to God in these podcasts. So I want us to see that all of us must become cognizant. Teachers and healers and ministers, and I think we're all teachers and healers and ministers. I think we need to have a sense of how these differences threaten each other, and therefore find ways to dilute it, water it down, make it softer, non-threatening. And I think stage 4 people are really trying to do this by becoming cognizant and seeing where people are and then addressing them at their needs where they are, and not trying to sell them on this bill of goods or put them down on that thing because of a certain belief. So I'm going to open it to my cohorts. Mary Ann Rudis is coming from Spokane Valley, Washington State. Bob Hayes is coming from Oviedo, Florida. I think that's the way you say it. I might be saying that wrong. And we're definitely an intercontinental thing. Bob, I'll start with you. I just laid out a whole bunch. What's your first response?
Well, having studied psychology and sociology for most of my life, I've seen a lot of these stage models, whether it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or whether it's Kohlberg's stages of moral development, or whether it's these stages you've just described. I think that they all kind of fit together. We're always at some stage, however we define it, as we move through our life. When you start talking about spiritual stages, that's where I get very confused, because I feel like I've been striving my whole life on a spiritual path, but I don't feel like I've accomplished all that much in terms of moving up the stages. I don't know that it's helpful to even try and define what stage you're on as an individual. I think it may be easier to see those around you and label them, but that, as soon as you start labeling people around you, you start sliding back down the stages. You're not as spiritual as you were before. So it's another one of these paradoxes that we are always grappling with. And I don't know. I'm going to just pause on that and say I'm still moving forward, whatever stage I am or wherever stage I'm moving toward.
Yeah, and I think a good indicator of the stage you're in is when you look at it, how much judgment is there. If you're judging another, you're probably in stage 3, maybe in the cusp. If you're not judging them, but saying, how can I speak to them in a way that they might hear, then you're probably closer to the stage 4. And I have to say, I oscillate back and forth between those two myself. And it's helpful to see that in myself, for whatever that's worth. Mary Ann, what's your comments on to open this?
Well, I don't know. I think there's something inside of me that rebels against any kind of labeling and stages in everything. But I think it's helpful to understand that, and for me, I don't think these are linear. I think we can go back and forth between a lot of these. I mean, there are times when I just go, somebody tell me what to do, right?
Yeah.
Please, I don't want to have to figure this out. And then there's other times where it's like, okay, I don't have to figure it out, and I can just live in that mystery. And so I think that, and my mind goes to like the stages of grief and those kind of things. And again, it's things that you pass back and forth in and out, and we're evolving. We're trying to figure it out. And there's the idea that there's this oneness for all of us, that we're all part of something that is bigger than us. And I think that goes into that mystery stage, that place of recognizing that there's something that we don't have control over, but that we're a part of, and accepting that. And then again, remembering that as we dip back into these other places, then being able to bring ourselves back to the idea that, okay, nope, this is all a mystery. This is something that we're here I don't know, it's almost like a grand experiment.
Yeah. However, I will say this. Some people see what you just said as a threat. And that's what I'm trying to talk about. That how do you talk to people who see your perspective as a threat? One that is existential. And this has made its way into politics, and that's why I want to talk about this. We talk about the evangelical vote. What we're talking about is stage 2 people. And to understand that, to have awareness of different ways of thinking about these differences and why am I a threat and how do I somehow defuse that threat. And I think that's very important for, both of you have talked about the fact that, the confusion in it and your honesty with that and the mystery. Well, that's already saying you're messing with stage 4 stuff. And if you look at our conversations over and over about the unity and interconnectedness of being, that's a root idea in stage 4. So what I'm suggesting is, and I agree with you, Marianne, you get me tired and hungry, I'm back to stage 1. I'm serious. My inner child is antisocial as hell at that point. So I do think we oscillate, but to have an awareness of that oscillation and to see how our perspective is threatening others can lend itself to a conversation that can create more healing and more ways of crossing those barriers, not just so we don't seem like a threat. And I mean, look at the one of the people I think of as the Dalai Lama. He seems to be able to speak to all the different stages in a really interesting way. I think Marianne Williamson seeks to do that. So I think there's people out there trying to build those bridges and to see why it is a bridge is necessary to start with. And, I have to say, when someone attacks me because of my wokeness, if you will, my first reaction is to just go ahead and meet them where they, at stage 2. And then something in me goes, wait a minute, what kind of mind talk is that going to create in them and in me once we leave this conversation? And I think that's an awareness that's very important. Go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to comment that there's one thing that adds to the complexity of this whole thing, and that's the situational aspects. I'll just give a hypothetical example. You got the good old boy who's obviously either a stage 1 or stage 2. He doesn't want to have anything to do with people who disagree with him, whatever. And he just goes out in his fishing boat, and he's to himself. But then something happens. There's a big flood. There's a hurricane, something. And suddenly that guy, in a miraculous way, takes that fishing boat and starts serving the community. He starts rescuing people from their flooded homes. He starts volunteering to take food to things. And I don't think it's something that he planned to do. I think it's something that the situation suddenly thrust him into a place that lifted him to a higher stage.
And that's a classic born-again conversion experience. And what's very interesting is that just about all the major religions, matter of fact, all the major religions are able to speak to every stage of this. And it's always amazed me that maybe that's why they're world religions, because they're able to address people where they are and give them an axis mundi, if you will, no matter what stage you're in. And, I share your aversion, y'all's aversion to stages and all that. But I will say that it's what you do with those understandings. I was taught that I was very stupid. By the time I was in the 5th grade, I was called stupid, a fool, an idiot, dumb, all those words that were applied to me. In high school, new people were warned not to hang out with me. My guidance counselor told me I had no future. So after I get out of the service, and my dad said, go up there to VA and take the IQ test, I went, He goes, do it. I realized I wasn't stupid. I was a bit above average. I was just like that guy on the Prairie Home Companion. You know, I'm one of them guys. So it was helpful to know, to have a standard, to see that, where I sat in the midst of this, and how I can create a life with what I have. So I think the different measures, and Bob, you named a bunch of them, from Kohlberg to, so did you, Mary Ann, stages of grief. Those are very helpful. They're helpful to process, and they're helpful as a doorway to more compassion and understanding of where people are, what we're stuck. I think Buddha said, man, we're all freaking stuck, and to have some sense, Bob, remember what we called our people, the quagmire core? What the fuck is a quagmire? It's what we're stuck in. We didn't know how honest we were being as young bucks.
And I think that you talked about awareness too, and identifying where we might fall in these different structures does bring us a great amount of self-awareness, right? And it brings us to a place where we can look at ourselves and, Bob, your example of the guy in the boat, disaster is a great equalizer. And it's when you start to realize that no man's an island. You're not in this alone. And that all of us are in this together. And that's kind of shifting people out of that first stage, that chaotic, just me and everybody's out to get me and I'm going to stand my ground and defend myself, versus no, we're all the same and we all need each other. So. And
Bob, what you talked about to me is very important. It's grace. We don't really know what it is, but and we're going to have to go there as a conversation, because it's you opened a door in me when you told that story, that grace is a great mystery. It's like the gods of random sync are lining up in your unconscious or something, and something happens that gets through, and that's. I think that, and I have to say, I moved from stage 3 to stage 4 under psychedelics. My first experience of that, and it was like, okay, everything my mom and dad told me wasn't true. Okay, everything the church told me wasn't true. It created in me, maybe it's from stage 2 to stage 3. I don't know. These are just entertaining ways of thinking about one's own development and evolution. I think a lot of people, if you're born to scientist parents, I think you skip stage 2 completely. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I really think what's happening in politics right now, and this is part of why I wanted to bring this up. There needs to be some way, some healing hand that lifts everybody up and can address everybody's perspective and somehow assuage this threat that we pose to each other, which is, I think, in many people's minds is very real.
Well, I think that is so true, that when we don't really recognize that we're feeling threatened, but to be able to put it into that context that, no, I'm feeling threatened, and why am I feeling threatened? I think this roadmap can play a big part in people's kind of understanding why they feel threatened, and they don't have to. They don't have to be threatened.
Well, we've talked about this before, but it's hard to believe sometimes that people don't think like me. I think that,
And why don't they?
You know, and I've shared the story at boot camp when I woke up that, holy mackerel, this is a very, people are not, we're not in Kansas anymore. We're not in Alexandria anymore. You know, I went to a high school where just about everybody went to college. It was a collegiate high school, you know. And, you know, the stories of why people went into the service were so different from my baseline that it blew me open. And I'm still getting blown open by that, by the way. And I do feel threatened. I don't feel threatened by people spiritually, but I do feel threatened by people who are spiritually unaware and have lots of guns and lots of anger. And that's part of why I think this is an important podcast, for us to start understanding and the great gulf between us. Because I'll tell you what, and I'll say this because I have to assume no evangelicals are listening to this podcast anyway. Evangelical Christianity is a big lie. It's bullshit. It's not even bullshit, because bullshit will make the garden grow. It is caca toxic. And I say that because I know a lot of people who have Jesus in their heart, and that's the only place Jesus stays. In some little corner somewhere in their heart, I don't know. Comes out on Sunday mornings and sings big hymns or something. I don't get it anymore. But that's my 2 cents on evangelical Christianity. But I want to say they're a threat. And we better understand what the threats are and the roots of them and how the thinking is rooted in that way of being. Because if we don't, 1, we can't lend compassion. 2, we'll never heal. And 3, we better get a lot of lefties to buy guns. You know, I personally think, this is just a side thought, if 1,000 black people lined up at a gun store, somewhere in one of these counties, it would do so much good, whether they buy the guns or not. So that was a side thought, and I just reduced myself to a stage 2 in that comment.
Well, you may be teasing with stage 1 there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I was going to say, that goes to my point. We go, it's fluid.
Yeah. I'm zipping through them all. I'm oscillating up and down. So, Marianne, final comments?
Well, you know, I think you talked about these threats that are out there that are real. And some of the rhetoric that I've seen lately is downright frightening. That there's some really, really horrible things that people are entertaining, engaging in, and who knows what's going to happen. But I don't think these are the people that are going to, they don't care about self-awareness. They don't care about coming together. They're very, very rooted. And so that kind of a threat, I think, is different than the one that you were talking about, for being open to understanding that those who may be thinking a little bit differently are not a threat, but they can be an ally. And how do you get there? But I think there's something happening where there's just downright, it's threatening. It is, and it is scary what's coming.
Yeah. And the fact that it's, I mean, if you look at just the word woke and how it's being used, the reason those folks are a threat is because we pose such a threat to them in their minds.
Right.
And that's another reason why I think we really need an awareness of these patterns of transformation. And I think, Peck, that's a great way of talking about them. Bob, final comments?
Well, you know, there used to be an aphorism that used to think that it was universally accepted, and that is, truth shall make you free. Well, today truth has become so convoluted, nobody knows what it means anymore. And I think that the real challenge for stage 3 and stage 4 people in communicating with stage 2 and stage 1 people is to figure out a way to use truth in a way that is not threatening to them. And that's a real challenge today because they don't want to accept what is actually happening. Yeah. So that challenge is, I mean, I don't have the answer to it because I'm a very impatient person. If our listeners haven't become aware of that over the months. But somehow the, quote, sword of truth has to be wielded in a way that we can cut through all of the BS.
Yeah. Well, and I have to say, Bob, now we're back to storytellers, aren't we? Because the story is what slips that by us. So, you know, I never really know where we're going to go. Once in a while, I know where we're going to go. You know, we're just swimming in the deep end. We're not trying to tell you this or that, to believe this or that. We're sharing what we see and how we've come to see it through decades and decades of being fools. I shouldn't say that about my colleagues, but I can say it about me. And you know, Bob gave us a great perspective and something I want to go to next one, and that's grace. What is this grace? What is it? Is it just the gods of random sync lining up and in a moment where synchronicity and something out there happens and it slips in? What is really going on with grace, and how can we understand it in our own lives? Because my life feels very gracious. I mean, in the history of human beings, I've studied enough to know that, man, wow, what a life. Very few human beings in history have had it as nice as most of us have had it. Grace, I think that the holy oneness of being is gracious. And I think that's part of the place where humans are waking up at that grace junction. But do I know that? It's more mystery. So until next time, my friends, be well, wonder deep, and many blessings.